John, how are you doing?
I'm really good. Nastasia Nicolau from the Nocturnal. That's like really good alliteration there.
It's a long one. I'm Greek. It's a big name. But yeah, I think this series is just so important to be talking about right now with everything that's been going on this past year. And just it's so relevant with mental health and talking about just the struggles that people are really going through internally. It was so refreshing to watch somebody kind of peel back layers each episode that we got to see, especially from Colin. I wanted to know how much of the script was from you getting angry and becoming this guy who's kind of like peeling back these layers, and how much of it was written into his character, because without giving too much away, we see him angry that came from you, and how much of it came from what was on the paper.
Yeah, well, all of it is on the page because it's so brilliantly written by Zach Whedon and the brilliant showrunners, Jen and Josh. And so when something is written as well as this, I mean, frankly, I think of it as like if I were doing a Eugene O'Neill play. I'm not, I have to make it mine, but the words are sacrosanct. You want to learn what these writers have written because you ain't going to improve it with your own words. Now, there are times you screw up and you think, maybe improv something to get yourself back into it, but you want to stay very much on book. So the places where I would lose my temper, sorry, and Colin does plenty of times, and he's all over the place, happy, sad, angry, funny. It's all in the script. And so like a great wave, I wish I were a surfer. I'm not. But if I were a surfer, I would think it would be like just being on an incredible wave, and you want to relax and breathe and ride it. So I did what was written for me and tried to do the best I could with it.
Think that we saw those emotions, the happy, the sad, the feeling low and feeling guilty, and then trying to deflect. We ride those emotions with Colin throughout the entire thing. I did want to know, how did you prepare for all of that? Because it's one thing to feel your emotions as a human being, and it's another thing to come up with this complex, complicated person who may be similar to you or maybe completely different from you. So did you guys actually go to therapy? Did you guys talk to therapists? How did you really dive into that groundwork?
Yeah. Well, I had been a person who had been probably 10 years in therapy when I was like in my 30s and benefited from it greatly. And I thought when I was trying to find my therapist, I was like, well, I need somebody like me. I need a man. I want him to be gay so he can help me understand who I am. And I came from a small town in Texas, and I was a New Yorker now, and all of the stuff that goes with that. And I ended up with a female therapist, and it really challenged me because I think I went in thinking, oh, well, she doesn't really understand who I am, so I just need to entertain her. I need to make sure, I want to make sure I'm not boring to her. And I think there's a similarity between Colin and me when he
Yeah.
book, because I think Colin is a guy who has very preconceived notions and ideas of what a straight white male would do for him if he was like near Colin's age, and what he gets, which is a female person of color, and he thinks it's okay, but it's not. It brings up a whole bunch of stuff. And I think it touches on all of our what's in our DNA as
Yeah.
as people of color. And it's uncomfortable, it's troubling, it's revealing, it's entertaining, because I think Brooke recognizes something in Colin that she doesn't have in common with him, but some of the deflection she sees, she understands all too well herself. So
Right.
So yeah, even though this character, my God, I hope I don't have that much in common with him. He's the rat.
Yeah.
But you, as an actor, you don't want to think in abstractions like that. You don't want to objectify your characters like, oh, he's a bad guy, so how do I play a bad guy? You want to make him as close to you, and you want to understand him. You want to have sympathy, empathy for the person, so you can reveal them as a human being and not just as a villain. And I think these writers did that. I think they weren't just interested in tearing down the patriarchy or just writing a privileged white guy who's screwed up. They wanted to write a real human being, and they did.
Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. It's not just this stereotypical white, male who's privileged and comes across as entitled, but because you do feel empathy for him at certain points. You do feel for him because you kind of see what he's grappling with. And, as we continue to watch on, we see kind of his personal relationships, why he may be the way he is. But I do want to ask, like, with the destigmatization of therapy, like he comes in just feeling like, oh, therapy, I just need to get this over with. I need to get out of jail. Like, I just need this written off. We're done here. Moving on. Why was it important for you to play a character that does help destigmatize mental health and talking about it, especially during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such an interesting question because I think Colin saw it literally as his get out of jail free card, because he doesn't think he has any stigma about mental health. He feels pretty woke, Colin. He thinks he's pretty woke. You come to find out he's maybe the least woke human being who's ever been on television. That's what's so extraordinary about talk about the onion, and the more you peel it, the more you smell it. The more it makes you cry.
Absolutely.
He has different kinds of people have different kinds of notions about what mental health and help for mental health is. And I think, as you said earlier, it's why the show is so important now, because in a sense, we've all been alone with ourselves for the past year plus. And to see a show about two people in a room together connecting, not always on happy, good, healthy levels, is really it's really important. And also, I mean, the show is a different show now because there's a much more diverse universe of human beings in that room with a completely different kind of therapist. And I think that's such a great reason to bring the show back. I mean, it's different.
Yeah, and the series is reimagined, but it does play homage to the original. Did you go back and watch the original both prior to filming?
I did. I had a lot of great friends on the original. Josh Charles' great friend, Hope Davis. A lot of my peers were on it, and they were all so brilliant. And I watched some of them again, and I remember what I thought when I watched it originally. I sounded like my, aunt and uncle from Oklahoma. How do you learn all those lines? Which is what somebody says to you when you're in a play, who's like, whatever. I just was like overwhelmed by how much people had to say with no real action other than what's going on in your internal life. You're not walking down a hospital corridor, like on ER, like get me that stat or West Wing.
Right.
No walking and talking.
It's just you guys talking to each other. It's like
revealing
the camera's on you, the camera's on Dr. Brooke. Right. It's a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of monologues.
Weirdly, it's so incredibly dynamic that you feel like you've literally run a marathon at the end of each episode. It was extraordinarily intimate as an actor in a year that lacked intimacy because none of us ever got to see each other. So it felt like this extraordinary gift, almost like a cure for. So I felt, listen, I was grateful to be working. I'm grateful to be working anytime. I was especially grateful in this year, but to be given a part like this, and given what it was about, given what we're going through in the world, was really something, like a confluence of events that felt like a gift.
Yeah. And what was the challenge though with the how the nature of the show is set up? Because it is like so intimate, and it's the camera's right on you, and you're having all of these emotions, and you're giving us so much of what's happening to him internally without even really saying it sometimes. So what was the challenge with that?
It's a good question, because you don't want to you can't be a blubbering mess on page 3, dude.
Yeah.
You have 27 pages to go, and the shit that's coming later in the episode makes what you're saying on page 3 seem like tiddlywinks.
You have to pace yourself.
Yeah, you'd have to pace yourself. We had great directors. We had 5, 6 amazing directors, and it was most of them 91 man. The rest were women of color. It was a really extraordinarily diverse universe, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, which was really, really exciting. And you would learn how to pace yourself, and you'd work with directors on not going too far, too fast. And you would also learn it as well as you possibly could, so you could write it, so you could get on the roller coaster part and just ride with your hands up the whole time. It was so I mean, I'm a firm believer in, through form there is freedom. So the more I know it, the more I'm able to let go of that and just try to fly with it. And that's when it was at its most exciting, was when I knew it so well, and Uzo always was so on top of it as well. And we got to play it like we were just in a play, that there's some people who happen to be in the room.
And we do leave off with your character without giving too much away. The last that I've seen, which was week 4 for Colin, he kind of exits the room. She's like, that's all our time. You've had this big blow up. You guys have kind of had some confrontation, almost feels a little bit personal. Yep. And he leaves. Are we going to get to see Colin come back? Because I feel like I didn't get enough closure. I want to know what's happening with him.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. But look, just suffice to say, there's so much that happens between those two people. And Colin, in some ways, learns such painful lessons about himself that it would surprise me if that were it, if he was able to leave not so well enough alone. And I don't necessarily think it's about unfinished business, as much as I think for the first time in his life, Colin, it's not met his match. It's not about that. I don't mean a match like, we're going to start dating, but like, he has been challenged in a way that nobody has ever challenged him before. And it is, for the first time in his life, made him feel truly reduced, even more so than prison. And he wants to know why.
I want to know why. So I am so excited if you get to come back, if we get to see more of his story. It's truly just such a enthralling show to watch, and I think it's doing something for everyone who's sitting inside still right now. So thank you for working on this project and destigmatizing mental health. I really
thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
So congratulations on this series. It is such an important show because we're talking about something that we don't talk about enough, which is mental health. And we really are opening up the topic and really showing how complex people truly are. I wanted to know, when digging into each of these individual characters, how did you prepare them for the intense emotions that they might feel throughout this series?
Preparing the actors
Yeah.
for, well, a lot of the actors that we cast, we gave them some material already before we met with them, so they kind of had an idea of who the character was and what they were going to go through, and we walked them through that. We had individual meetings once the actors were cast. We didn't have all the scripts written, but we kind of had an idea of where they would go. And so we had individual meetings with all of the actors just to walk them through where they were going and to let them know so that they understood what was coming and how to prepare for it, because we had a very compressed production schedule. And so they had to sort of be ready. And I mean, they took to it like fish to water. I mean, so many of our actors have theater experience, like extensive Broadway theater experience. And so they were game. They were up for the challenge. And I hope that shows on screen.
It definitely does. I mean, the amount of emotion I felt as a viewer, I felt like I was on that ride with them. I do know that this series is reimagined. So, how important was it for you guys to pay homage to the original? I know there's some like Easter eggs in there with different things that you guys left behind.
So yes, in preparation for this new season, I can only speak for myself. I watched all 106 episodes of the show again. I'd watched them as they aired originally because I was a fan of the original show. But just to get ready, I had to sort of eat, sleep, and breathe in treatment. And yeah, it takes a while to binge 106 episodes of anything, but it worked because it just sort of like seeped in after a while. Like there would be moments where like I would like put it on as I was falling asleep because I would hope it would just like get into my subconscious.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we definitely wanted to honor the original 3 seasons because we wanted people who enjoyed those 3 seasons, people like me, to be excited about this new season and know that we weren't just making some brand new show and calling it in treatment, that we actually were, this is in the same universe.
Right.
You know?
Almost like a continuation. It's more of just like a more modernized version.
Yes.
I love all of the references to different LA things, like when Eladio is talking about El Cochanito and,
Yes.
you know, like one of the restaurants in Silver Lake, and just all of the different little Easter eggs that really make it so modern, and it's so relatable. The fact that they're even zooming and, you know, talking about quarantine and talking about the pandemic. Why was it important for, you know, everyone behind the scenes to come together on this project and say, this is the time we need to talk about this. We need to have representation of different people on screen. We need to be talking about mental health. What were those conversations behind the scenes like?
Well, it's interesting because one of our main considerations coming into doing this new season was that we can't do a show about therapy and mental health in 2021 without acknowledging why so many more people are so more in need of it now.
Yeah.
We knew we couldn't pretend like we were in a world where the pandemic didn't exist. You know, we weren't a period piece. We weren't a fantasy show. Like we're so rooted in reality that it would be like a betrayal to not acknowledge the reality of what people are going through, right? So that was really important to us. But at the same time, we kind of had to like make our crystal ball and be like, last August or September, we didn't even know if there would be vaccines. We didn't know what the world was going to look like in May of 2021. So we had to sort of guess and like, acknowledge it without making it a show about COVID. So that was definitely a challenge. But regardless, we knew that we wanted to make therapy look a little different. We wanted to show that you can have access to therapy no matter where you come from, what you look like, what your socioeconomic background is. We gave Brooke a pro bono patient. We tried in every way possible to just put a different spin on it. And even for, jaded Angelinos, like we were like, oh no, Baldwin Hills is a really affluent area that you may never have heard of. Like we could have put Brooke in Beverly Hills, but like we chose to put her in Baldwin Hills, in the neighborhood. She came back to the neighborhood where she grew up, and she was always upper middle class. And she didn't come from she doesn't have that story that a lot of people want to see on TV, which is like, oh, Black woman has struggled, she's poor. Like that, we were not interested in that at all.
Dr. Brooke, without giving too much away, she's having these internal struggles herself. Yes. Why was it important to show that she, even a therapist, a licensed therapist who has clients, can also suffer from her own internal battles?
Well, I think it was a couple of things for us. I think the first thing was just purely on a making television level. We wanted to dimensionalize Brooke as much as possible. And we just wanted to give Uzo stuff to sink her teeth into. And we just wanted we wanted Brooke to be as compelling a TV character as possible, because that just makes for drama and great entertainment, and people will see, a fully realized human being on screen, which is never bad. Yeah. But also, I think, I'm not a therapist, but we had a consultant, and I've talked to many therapists, and therapists are people too. And, people, and now because of, the pandemic, Brooke has had to move her practice into her home. So people are literally coming into her home and just sort of leaving their stuff, their psychological stuff in her house. And then when they leave and their stuff is still there, so to speak. And she's so empathetic that it's sometimes she doesn't know where to put all of it. And she's treating people in this very unique time that we're all going through, that she is also going through. Like she is also still a person in the world. And so it's a unique challenge for her too. And so I think we wanted to show how it's affecting her too. She shows up for her patients every single time, and she's brilliant and empathetic and insightful, but it has to cost her in some way. And so we felt like we would be, I guess, remiss if we didn't show that.
I'll wrap with this. I did want to say that this series leaves off with a point where we don't know really, after what I've seen so far is the 4 weeks in. And so we kind of leave, Colin leaves. We don't exactly know what's going on with Dr. Brooke Taylor and her own internal struggles. And we don't really know what's going to happen next. As we see more episodes, are we going to get more answers to some of our questions? How many more episodes are we going to get? I'm on a cliffhanger here.
I don't know what you've seen, but I will say this is encouraging, your response, because you don't feel like the movie's over. You want more. And so that is where we always want to keep people.
Yes, we'll just have to wait and see. I am very excited. I'm very excited to see these next episodes. Hopefully we can get some more answers, because I think this is a show that you get very invested in every single character and you feel like you know them.
Wonderful to hear. Thank you so much.
I mean, I felt like I knew each of them and could pinpoint who they were, even in my life, like, oh, this is this person. I relate to her because of this. So I'm excited to see where their story goes and what they end up finding out about themselves. It's very interesting to have that mirror up to them. So thank you for bringing a show to TV that we can kind of relate to.
And well, thank you for paying attention to it, honestly.